Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, and I'm coming at you live to talk about the 1987 Bates Motel teleplay, or made for TV movie, which I only just recently finally caught up with. I've been looking for this thing for years. Being a longtime fan of the Psycho film franchise, the original started with Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho in I think it was 1960, and in the 80s they resurrected it with Psycho 2, you had Psycho 3, and then it all rounded out in 1990 with Psycho 4 The Beginning, all starring Anthony Perkins as Norman Bates, the runner and owner of the Bates Motel. And this movie is weird. It's kind of an anomaly. It came out the year after Psycho 3 came out, and it's existing in its own timeline apart from what is established in all of the movies. That is to say, whereas in Psycho 2, Norman Bates is freed from the asylum he was sent to after the events of the first movie, and he moves back to the motel. Murders start happening again, and there's some debate about whether he's responsible or not by some of the returning characters and some of the, new faces and everything in that movie. And by Psycho 3, he has succumbed to madness again, and he ends up back in the asylum. And so it's arguable where this movie, this TV movie, falls into play. It seems as though it's picking up as a pseudo-sequel story to the original, sort of eschewing Psycho 2 and Psycho 3. But I think it's arguable that maybe it might have loosely fit in as an extension of where the story left off after Psycho 3. But by and large, the impression I get from this very off-the-wall, odd TV movie, Bates Motel, is that it must have been like, intended to be a pilot for a TV series. Something a la like Fantasy Island or something like that, where you would have people checking into the hotel and experiencing seemingly supernatural things, learn something about themselves, be taught a lesson because of how this TV movie plays out. That's the only thing I can wrap my mind around as to explain the way it's set up. The entire movie, the first three quarters of the entire movie, is setting up the backstory of Bud Cort's character, Alex. As a boy, he was beaten and abused by his father, who owned a dry cleaning store. And he would be shoved into one of these giant dryers and locked inside it. It wouldn't be turned on or anything like that. But he would be kept in there for hours to be out of his father's hair. One day he has enough and he pushes his father into one of these machines. And as the nurse would later describe, he dry cleaned his daddy. So this makes young Alex, the focused character of this TV movie, catatonic as a young man, and he's sent to a psychiatric asylum. The same asylum that Norman Bates is being contained within. Now, it's said that the only friend young Alex ever had in the world was this little bird who died and whom he subsequently stuffed. Now, for anyone who even has a remote interest in Psycho, you might know that Norman Bates, his one sort of hobby, the one passion that he has, apart from the psychosis side of things, is taxidermy, is stuffing birds. So the psychiatric doctor in the film, as portrayed by Robert Picardo, for fans of Star Trek Voyager, the holographic doctor, it's his estimation that we have to put Alex with Norman because they have that commonality. Stuffing birds. Maintaining this poor little bird, making sure the stuffing stays in and everything like that. And so a rapport grows off screen between young Alex and Norman, who becomes sort of a surrogate father. And the entirety of the movie is basically building up the point of view that Norman was never actually released from the asylum. He actually dies while still being held within it. And when Alex is fully grown to a young man, he is bequeathed the Bates Motel by Norman and then goes to, basically find it and refurbish it. He's going to rebuild it and everything like that, and not tear it down or anything like that, but refurbish the existing motel and the house that sits up on the hill behind it, as well as build like a little restaurant. And he's going to try to make it all active again, bustling again, which he believes is an extension of what Norman would have wanted. And so the first three quarters of the movie is this part of the story, is Bud Cort's Alex, going to Fairville, California, tracking down the Bates Motel, and there's this whole weird, semi-off-putting, like 2-minute long comedy sequence where everyone he runs into, oh, I just moved here, I don't know, I'm new in town, I'm new in town, I'm new in town, I'm new in town. For 2 minutes straight, everybody he runs into says the same thing. I'm new in town, leave me alone, I'm new in town, I don't know where Bates Motel is. Finally, he runs into a character played by Moses Gunn, who's a old-time actor. He's been on the Jeffersons and things like that. He is a contractor handyman. He is the only person who admits to living in Fairville, California for a very lengthy time, knows where Bates Motel is, knows its entire history, and he brings young Alex, well now the grown Alex, up to speed as to all of the history, the deaths and things that happened, and what led, Norman to the asylum. All of the things that he didn't know, that he hadn't heard from the horse's mouth, Norman Bates himself. And this doesn't deter Alex. He's going to refurbish and reopen the Bates Motel, even given this dark history. So it proceeds that he hires some people. He goes to a bank to get a loan, and the bank guy is very shifty. He's suspicious from right off the bat. And he's not going to give him money directly, but then he's like, well, go find a contractor. And there's a whole thing, there's a whole backstory plot going on between this bank guy and the first contractor Alex finds. And they're trying to, like, what they really want, they got, money bags in their eyes. Because if Alex would just tear down the motel and sell the land, they could make millions of dollars. That's not what he wants to do. So there's this whole aspect of people trying to put him off the property by saying it's haunted with the spirit of old Mother Bates, who's called not Norma Bates, as she's more commonly known, but Gloria Bates. He's basically told, Alex is basically told by this banker later on in the movie that she, would spend nights awake all night while her husband was maintaining the motel, and would watch down from her window up in the house while little Norman, after he was born, would be crying all night in his cradle in the other room, and she suspected that her husband was cheating on her. Eventually he disappeared, and she would wear black from that day forward, and everyone in town would say she was in mourning, maybe she killed him, and all this kind of stuff. And so this is all the backstory. They're really laying it on thick to try to scare Alex from staying and refurbishing and getting this motel up and running again. So I'm wondering, as I'm watching this movie, is there going to be death? Is there going to be murder? Is there going to be supernatural stuff? And sure enough, there is some weird stuff going on where they do uncover the corpse of Mother Bates on the property. They subsequently also find the corpse of her husband, who had gone missing, I think they say 50 years previously, whom she is suspected to have killed. Or perchance, Norman killed him, to get back at his cheating on mommy or whatever. I don't know. But she went mad. And it kind of loosely puzzle piece-like fits into the plot of the original Psycho. Kind of. Now, by this point in the movie, though, all of a sudden everything stops. You veer off to the left, unprecedentedly, inexplicably, with the debut of a character who is a yoga person or an aerobics instructor who's also an aspiring writer, allegedly. This is the story she gives, Alex, who's just gotten the motel finally refurbished, and they've built a little restaurant on the property. They're just waiting for some clientele. Lo and behold, this also coincides with the fact that the bank guy screwed him and is expecting $10,000 the next day. They haven't even been in operation for a full 24 hours, and they owe $10,000 on the back loan. So you're wondering, how is all not completely and utterly lost? And, well, unfortunately for the next 10, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, that's not going to be a care or concern, because you're following now this woman who checks into the motel, who claims to be an aerobics instructor writer, who then writes a couple of suicide postcards before hopping into the bathtub and intending to kill herself. Shades of Psycho 3. With the nun who escapes from the nunnery and then tries to kill herself and is saved by Norman Bates, only to, just be part of that whole madness that ensues in Psycho 3. Well, this woman does get stopped from killing herself. Something does impact her and stop her from killing herself, and that is, again, kind of akin to Psycho 3. You know, a bunch of people show up on the property and they all want rooms, they all want to have a party. It's all these teenagers, and they are, for all intents and purposes, dressed like they're going to a 1950s sock hop. They all are products of the 50s. They're in, 57 Chevys and Woodies and everything like that. The sort of trucks from back in the day. And they all look like Buddy Holly or sock hop girls and everything like that. And so one of these girls happens to stumble into the lady who's going to kill herself's room number 12, and she prevents her from doing it, from killing herself. She invites her to the party, she tries to perk her up, she tries to get her excited and happy and jovial and all that kind of stuff, and she's very welcoming, this younger girl, and she brings the older lady, to the party, and she lightens up a little bit. She meets one of the young guys, as introduced by this sock hop girl. And you just wonder now, like, if you're watching this movie, you've been watching about the Bates Motel being refurbished and rebuilt and set up all over again, and all of a sudden Alex is nowhere to be seen. You have Lori Petty shows up in the movie. She's like, I guess, one of the main characters. She was a squatter in the house up on the hill behind the motel. And then, like, when Alex gets back to the motel, he runs into her and he's kind of scared by her. He tries to scare her off, but she's a loudmouth and she doesn't take no for an answer. And she keeps coming back and saying, I'm going to be your manager. I'm going to be your restaurateur. I'm going to be your chef so I can make your meals. All of this stuff just has stopped, is gone away. And we're focusing on this writer lady who has been prevented from committing suicide, is now introduced to this young man, and they're having a dance on the floor of the restaurant. Queen of the Hop is playing, and she is the brink of happiness. She's been saved, and it's intriguing, but I'm like, WTF, what is going on? Where'd the other story go? And then, like, she gets really close and intimate with the young man she was introduced to, a young Jason Bateman, I might add. And they're hitting it off, and they almost share a kiss, and she suddenly recoils because she feels like she's an old maid. She is. The actress Carrie Keene, who plays this writer aerobics instructor, is sexy as hell. But she's supposed to be like, she thinks she's on her last leg. She's had 3 failed marriages. She's never had any children. She feels like a failure, and that's why she wants to commit suicide. So this young guy, as portrayed by Jason Bateman, they almost have an intimate thing, and she recoils, and she's like, oh my God, you're just a child, you're a boy, and I'm an old lady, I could be your mother. And so there's, some tumultuous stuff going on between them. And so then she goes back to her room after all of this, and she's going to go through with it again. She's going to try to kill herself again, having that depression reinvigorated. All of a sudden, the sock hop girl shows up again, and I forgot to point out, the sock hop girl is played by Christine Hodge from Head of the Class, one of my earliest crushes from the 1980s sitcom Head of the Class. She somehow manages to get inside room 12 again after the woman has returned to her room and locked the door. And I'm like, okay, what's going on? Something supernatural, something ghostly's going on. How'd she get in the room? How'd she know? She knows so much about her per the dialogue. She knows her real name. She knows she's trying to be a writer. She knows she came here to kill herself. And suddenly the other leg drops, and you find out that all of these kids in 50s and 60s attire are spirits of people who have successfully killed themselves during that time period. During the time period, most notably, of her own youth. This writer come suicidal lady. So they all basically arrived at Bates Motel with the express purpose of trying to talk her out of it, of making her realize that their own killing themselves was a mistake, and they realized it only too late, and they want to make sure she doesn't go through with it. Fair enough. I don't know where this came from in the movie. It's a whole other thing. It's a whole other story. It has nothing to do with the rest of the movie. Finally, after that, we pick up with where we left off, and we find out that the bank guy It turns out it's his sleazy brother-in-law who was the contractor who was trying to spook everybody in the refurbishing process of the motel, and was trying to chase Bud Cort's Alex away so they could sell the property and make a whole crap ton of money on it. In order to do so, this banker guy, has been donning a black dress and has been showing up places that Alex will see it to try to freak him out and such like that. And he even, he doesn't hire anybody else to do it. He just shows up in the house wearing a black dress and like a skull face mask to terrorize Alex into leaving the property. He is caught by the black handyman, Moses Gunn's character, and Lori Petty actually shows up again, the squatter, in an identical outfit where this guy thinks it's the real Mother Bates ghost. And so it's kind of like, it's madcap. It's like a double bait and switch where the bank guy was trying to scare Alex, and then they are trying to scare the bank guy, and they end up recording his confession that he was just trying to chase Alex out of town. And they use that to blackmail the guy to hold off on the money they owe so they can actually try to make money with the motel. Now, the reason why I say this feels like it was like a TV pilot for a potential Fantasy Island-esque kind of series is because the final scene has Bud Cort's Alex standing in the parking lot waving goodbye to the writer lady who has a new lease on life, not having committed suicide, being taught that she should not make that mistake. She shouldn't succumb to that by these 1950s and 60s era ghosts that just showed up out of nowhere. Once she is gone away, Bud Cort's Alex then pointedly addresses you, the viewer, and says, well, that's some of the crazy stuff you might see around here. If you ever want to have a nightcap, you ever want to stay over somewhere, you need some place to stay, consider coming down to the Bates Motel. You never know what you're going to find here, but the differences are what makes the world go round. And so the insinuation is the whole movie, the majority of the movie is setting up, okay, this is how Alex became the owner of the Bates Motel. This is why it looks different from the movie. He rebuilt it, he added on to it, he refurbished it. We have an ingrained couple of villains in the brother-in-law who is the contractor and the bank guy who are going to be overlording. And this is going to be a problem for the main characters of Alex, Lori Petty's character, Willie, the squatter turned, restaurateur, and Moses Gunn's handyman, alternate contractor guy, the good contractor. These are our main characters and our main weekly villains. The people who are always going to be causing problems for us are the banker and the other contractor, or something like that. And then that 3/4 mark eschewing to the right or the left, with this whole story to do with the writer come aerobics instructor, come suicidal lady, old maid, as she considers herself, is an example of what you will tune into every week if it goes to series. People will check into the motel. They will experience something supernatural that will reawaken them or reinvigorate them, or their past will catch up to them and they'll be taught a lesson or something like that. That is the only way I can wrap my mind around how you have 3/4 of the movie that's about refurbishing the Bates Motel. And then suddenly veering off with something completely different for like 15, 20 minutes. And then coming back to it and being told basically by the end, come on, check on in to the Bates Motel. You never know what you're going to find. You never know what you're going to experience. It is bizarre. It was such a bizarre thing to experience and watch. The whole time I'm like, are there murders? Is there ghosts? What's going on? And I never expected. I figured it was probably somebody was trying to set up, make it look like there were ghosts and try to spook Alex. I had already figured that plot point out, a mile away, early on into the movie. I never expected there to be actual supernatural ghostly stuff going on, so I was gobsmacked when that actually, other leg drops, and that actually was the case. With these 50s and 60s doo-wop, sock hop spirits who try to make this writer, aerobics instructor, not commit suicide. I was stunned when that happened. So this is a movie for the ages. My God. I really would have been intrigued to see if this had been picked up for a series, what kind of stories we would have gotten, Twilight Zone-esque, Fantasy Island-esque. But the whole movie, it's like, you pop in Shawshank Redemption, and 3/4 of the way through the movie, all of a sudden a Happy Days episode starts. One of the darker ones. And then after the half hour of that episode, then you get back to the movie. That's what this movie was like. It was gobsmacking. But very, very intriguing. I have to do some research and find out if this was intended to be like a backdoor pilot for a potential series, because that's very much what it felt like. I know nothing about it. I've never heard anyone else's, talking about it or read up on it. I knew it existed because I'd run into it Google searching information on the, Psycho movie franchise proper. And so I searched it out. I finally got to see it, and my God, it is mind-blowingly weird. Again, starring Bud Cort, Lori Petty, featuring appearances from Greg Henry, Moses Gunn, Carrie Keane, the sexy, scintillating Carrie Keane at the time. They're trying to pass her as an old maid, and I'm just not buying it. I'm like, are you kidding? Does she have a mirror? Does she have a working mirror, plate of glass, anything with a reflection on it? Young Jason Bateman, again, Christine Hodge from Head of the Class, Robert Picardo, recognizable faces all throughout, but it is so strange and so bizarre. And if you've seen it, if you're watching this video, I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments below what you thought of the 1987 teleplay TV movie Bates Motel. I would be surprised if anyone watched this and wasn't, resoundingly confused and like, what did I just watch, as I was left. And love her to hate it. Anything goes in the comments below. It's all about the topic of talking. Having a great discussion about interesting movies, TV shows, anime series, stuff like that, as I cover on my channel. Otherwise, it'll be pretty much it for me on this. Hope this video finds you well. I'll catch you all later. Peace.